For more on the latest in the North, I'm joined in studio now by former Europe and Middle East editor for the Associated Press, international affairs analyst Dan Perry. Dan, thanks for being with us this afternoon. Hello. It seems that the latest deal trying to be moved forward by France, it's off the table for now, according to Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. They don't want to see France involved in any of these moves, even though really since October 8th, when Hezbollah got involved, it has been France doing the most to push forward a deal like this. And so what does this mean for possible diplomatic efforts on the North?
It means that Gallant is either posturing or that he is not the sole repository of wisdom in the world, because Israel needs assistance in dealing with Hezbollah. The strategic equation vis-a-vis Hezbollah is extremely difficult because Israel, as a more rational player, is in fact deterred by Hezbollah's arsenal of rockets that can reach the studio and cause monumental damage. And because Hezbollah, to a degree, it takes its orders from Iran, not fully, but to a degree, they may be capable of taking action that would visit extreme destruction on Lebanon. Now, Israel might be dragged into such an escalation, but it's not particularly fair to Lebanon. It's not particularly attractive to Israel, who faces enough pressure in the world for causing damage to various neighbors that don't control the terrorist groups that operate from their midst. So this is a bad, bad situation. France is a friend of Israel. The U.S. is involved. Mediation is probably the only way to avoid an escalation at some point, because eventually, given a volume of Hezbollah shelling of the north, some errant rocket will kill a lot of people and Israel's hand will be forced. So a less cautious, more introspective, more strategic leadership would certainly embrace the French-American efforts to mediate and not engage in petty accounting.
Well, it seems that some sort of a deal that Israel might want to see, because as you mentioned, it doesn't seem neither Israel nor Lebanon want to fully drag this out into a war. Otherwise, we likely would have seen it by now from both Hezbollah or...
Lebanon doesn't want this for sure, but Hezbollah doesn't really listen to what Lebanon wants.
No, but it could be Hezbollah doesn't want this either. Otherwise, they could have gone much further, as you said. Their capabilities are there. Yes. So if we do go back, Israel has already been living with this threat on the border. So you mentioned a diplomatic solution, but it might not push Hezbollah past the Litani River in accordance with the UN Resolution 1701. So then the other option is just going back, knowing they're there at the border, these Hezbollah terrorists looking into some of the homes in northern Israel. That's how close they are.
Let's agree that the current situation is unacceptable. The risks of taking direct military action to address that unacceptability are themselves unacceptable. So you need a deus ex machina, external assistance, some change in the narrative. It's not simple, that's for sure. And I think probably the truth is that, for the moment at least, the paradigm says that Hezbollah will keep this low-grade, somewhat calibrated, but incredibly impactful and inadmissible nonetheless, warfare against Israel as long as Gaza continues. And therefore, that adds to the array of factors that are compelling Israel, I think, to consider seriously ending the war in Gaza on terms that 8 months ago might have seemed unacceptable, to wit, allowing Hamas in some form or other to remain in Gaza, however diminished and degraded.
120 hostages still remain captive in Gaza. And now, senior Hamas official Osama Hamdan says, quote, "No one has an idea of how many hostages are still alive." His incredibly crass statement came in an interview with CNN. Take a look.
After 8 months of this war, more than 37,000 Palestinians have been killed, probably more than 80,000 injured. Was it a necessary sacrifice for the people of Gaza?
You seem that you can't start from the beginning. Let's start from page number 1. Why to talk about the page of the 7th of October? What about the Israeli occupation?
No, I'm talking about what came after the 7th of October.
Well, the 7th of October was a reaction against the occupation. What comes after that, it shows the real face of Israel. It shows how Israel is occupying the Palestinian lands demolishing the situation of the Palestinians, killing the civilians. It's not the first time they are killing the civilians.
Dan Perry, I want to come back to you in studio and first hear your perspective when you're hearing these claims, speaking on behalf of the Hamas terror organization. What are your thoughts?
Look, I got to be honest. He's a pretty good spokesman for a quite demonic cause, and a lot of people might find themselves convinced. So viewers should know the degree to which this is gaslighting, meaning he's creating an alternative reality. He says that October 7th is a reaction to the occupation. I would agree with him that the occupation of the West Bank is not a great situation, and Israel has been trying to find a solution to it for about 30 years. And the reason why those efforts have failed are because of Hamas. The organization he represents opposes a partition of the Holy Land into an Israel and a Palestine because they think it's an abomination to make any compromise with Israel. And consequently, every time there was progress towards peace, Hamas would find itself blowing up buses, cafes, pubs, shopping centers in an effort to move the Israeli public to the right, counting on the Israeli right to then scuttle the efforts at partition. The reason why there is no Palestinian state is because Hamas managed to scuttle various efforts, and also because the PA in 2008-9, faced with a pretty good Israeli proposal, failed to grab it in time before the Israeli right came back to power. So it's a very sad situation. I cannot disagree with him that the occupation needs to, to transition into something better and into a hopeful future for the Palestinians. But Hamas is the reason why the Palestinians have no hope. And tragically, Hamas does have some support, because once they achieved control of Gaza, they quite effectively brainwashed the youth. And it's a highly youth-oriented society. And now there is a real need to re-educate a whole generation of Palestinians. But I can't let Israel off the hook. That will not be done without an Israeli leadership that offers the Palestinians a positive vision that is something other than eternal living by the sword and putting up with living under the boot of Israel without equal rights as citizens forevermore. That's not going to fly. So as long as Israel sticks, right-wing Israel sticks to that position, we can expect Palestinian radicalization and also a lot of confusion on the Palestinian side, confusion that leads to support for the satanic likes of Mr. Hamdan.
It's not only confusion that we're seeing in the Palestinian youth, it's confusion we're seeing in some Western youth as well. Talk about the protesters, but it's some of them, they still watch a spokesperson like this, and when you talk about brainwashing, it is brainwashing, and it's not only the Palestinian youth, it's successfully brainwashing a lot of the youth in Western democratic countries as well.
Yeah. That's true, and that's a whole related but different story. The youth in the West that conflate Hamas and the Palestinian cause incorrectly simply don't know the facts. It is a rank failure by Israeli PR, public diplomacy, outreach efforts. And also a function of the fact that, Israel's behavior towards the Palestinians in West Bank is not pretty. So Israel already is cast as sort of the bad guy in that context. It's a landscape very friendly for Hamas propaganda and gaslighting. But, I mean, I have to say this very clearly. To support Hamas, thinking you're supporting the Palestinian cause is like supporting the Nazis because you think you're supporting the Germans. Hamas is the enemy of the Palestinians precisely as the Nazis were the enemies of the Germans and all of humanity. And I say all of humanity with a purpose of forethought. If the jihadi Palestinian narrative is allowed to prosper, it will infect the overall jihadi narrative, and it is coming to a shopping center in London and New York after you. That really should be understood. So the likes of Hamdan and Hamas really must be marginalized, but as I've been saying, I don't think it can come purely from force of arms.
Well, meanwhile, as we're talking about the hostage situation, and as we heard from Hamdan, who says it's unclear exactly, he claims how many hostages are still alive. We're still talking about that successful rescue mission, and one of the rescued hostages, Andrei Kosolov, he's pushing for the public to attend the weekly rally at Hostages Square in Tel Aviv tonight, Saturday. It's the first time he's speaking out since his rescue 1 week ago. He said it's these exact rallies that gave him hope for the past 8 months while in Hamas captivity. Take a listen.
Hello, I'm Andrei Kozlov, and I'm already in Israel, at home. but a lot of hostages are still there in Gaza. I saw a lot of rallies on Saturday, and it gave me a lot of hope. I ask you to come and support families and hostages to Kikar HaTufim in this Saturday.
Dan, what do you think could happen tonight after hearing this message from one of the rescued hostage who says it's these exact rallies that gave me hope that people are listening and looking for me right now?
You know, there are times when looking at something at the human level clarifies and shows you the light and the path. There are times where it obfuscates and may take you away from a rational view of the situation. So sure, there will be a lot of people tonight rallying for a hostage deal. But I think if we're realistic, I think if we want to be intelligent about this, we need to really understand what the price of that hostage deal is. And I think these months and months of negotiations with Hamas have clouded people's judgment. But if they look clearly at the quite consistent message of Hamas, it's rather obvious to me, and I believe to Israeli intelligence as well, that you could kill 1 million people in Gaza and Hamas will not be moved because they do not care. And as we saw from the statements from Yahya Sinwar, which Hamdan lies about and says that we're manipulated, those are true statements, and that is Hamas's true view. They view civilian casualties as a benefit of some sort because it rubbishes Israel and creates pressure on Israel. I mean, you almost can't believe that anyone could be that way, but they most certainly are. As was ISIS, as was Al-Qaeda, as is the Taliban. It's birds of a feather. Given that the cost of returning the hostages is ending the war without regime change in Gaza. And that is a dangerous, dangerous thing, because there is a plausible argument that says that in this part of the world, this is not Scandinavia. It may be Scandinavian during the Viking era. This is a part of the world where your enemy must be brought to heel. And if Israel leaves Gaza with Hamas beaten but unbowed, then that will create incentive for more and more war against Israel. They simply must be crushed. That is an argument I don't dismiss. I am coming to the realization that that may nonetheless, after 8 months, be the way to go because of the opposite side of the equation. If Israel doesn't do this, then it gives up on a series of dominoes that are good. If Israel ends the war, taking the risk of leaving Hamas in power to a degree in Gaza for now at least, remember the war can be resumed, then that ends the fighting in the north. That enables probably the American NATO-backed mega deal with Israel and moderate Sunni Arab countries forming a defensive alliance amid normalization and peace with Saudi Arabia, a raid against Iran, which is the ultimate enemy that we're talking about. There's a lot of good things that will happen alongside the risk of leaving Hamas to a degree, potentially for a while more in Gaza. And that would rescue the hostages. So it's a difficult, difficult choice. I think adults need to look the truth and reality in the eye and make such a difficult choice, essentially calculating which is the least bad option.
Clearly, no easy solution on the table, or one would have already been found at this point. Dan Perry, thanks so much for your analysis, as always.
Thank you, Nicole.